If you do have a camera, please go ahead and turn it on. Some people having camera issues, no worries. All right. How's everyone doing? Is everyone hanging in there with the fires? I know we're all across California. Everyone's doing okay. I know.
Doing good.
For those of you that are being affected, our thoughts are with you guys, and just know that we get it to a certain level, but it's just a challenging space to be in. And so, yeah, just wanted to say that up front. Like, our thoughts and prayers are with you, and hopefully even today, during today's session, if there's challenges you're facing in that regard, as you're releasing volunteers to support the fires, or if you're involved in any way, hopefully we can even provide some tips and some support today in that area. But we'll go ahead and get started. I think I've met most of you, at least via Zoom, from our first couple orientations. My name is Kevin Pappas. I'm the training manager here at 10C. I've been with the organization for about a year. And yeah, 10C has been commissioned by California Volunteers to, through the capacity grant, to provide volunteer management capacity training to you guys, specifically focused on volunteerism during a time of disaster, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. So really excited that you guys are all here. Before we get into some logistics and details, I'm going to let Ursula introduce herself. You guys probably met her on the orientation, but I'll let her say hello really quick as well.
Hi everybody, it's nice to see you on a Friday. I'm really excited and surprised that so many people joined us, because yes, we all know that Fridays are challenging, and right now not only every day is challenging, but Fridays are almost like Mondays. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Just real quick, I just want to say, as we still navigate through these challenges of COVID-19, and obviously we have new challenges with social unrest and all these things that are going on, the need to increase, our community engagement and to champion volunteerism in all forms has never been more important. And so really right now is the time that we can steward those purposeful relationships. We can reach out to local companies, the community, and especially our faith-based partners to provide, safe opportunities for these folks. And as we continue to allow reconnections in a social distancing world, I guess is the best way to say it, we can tap into some skills and some folks that really can give back to their community. And that's what we're really going to focus on today. There's some people sent in questions, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but there's some great types of ways that everyone can get involved, and I'm hoping by the end of today's presentation, the dialogue that we have, maybe even some crucial conversations that don't need to leave this room, that we can feel better, number one, going into a real weekend maybe, but also, have some plans in place to make this a little bit easier next week. So just know it doesn't stop with this one training. We're here for you. And of course, we've talked about office hours and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to reemphasize it, because that really is what this is about. Someone asked me the other day, oh, I'm not doing this. Should I upload it? I don't really know. And I said, no, if it's not real world, we're not going to ask you to make up something. We want you to be engaged, and we want this to help you now. This isn't about, a binder on your shelf. So hopefully when you leave today, that's the way this feels.
Awesome. Thanks, Ursula. So just some quick logistics before we jump in. I know you guys attended the orientation last week, and then we had a makeup this week, and we've thrown a lot at you guys. So thank you for taking that in stride, because we know it's a lot, and you're doing the volunteer management certificate online, and there's a lot there. But just a few quick logistical reminders. By the end of today, you should be finished with module 3 of the volunteer management certificate. I actually want to just commend you guys, because I think like 82% of you are already done with it. So well done. In the midst of many of you guys being new vistas and be placed at your sites or having full-time work, we understand it's a lot to add. So well done. For the other 19% though, make sure you try and work on as much as you can today, or take some time this weekend, because next Friday, basically we're done. We're having our closing ceremony next Friday. So If you have any questions with that, like Ursula said, we really, as a staff at 1OC, we carved out this time because we really want to make sure we can get into the nitty gritty with you guys. If you have questions that come up during the certificate, or if you're in the recruitment section, or you're in the volunteer engagement section, and you have questions about how that pertains to your specific organization in this time, we really want you guys to take advantage of that. And so we've had a few of you, but I would encourage you for this next week, put it on your calendars. You know, we have them pretty much every day at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., and 3 p.m., except for there's a couple 3 p.m.s next week we don't have. But put it on your calendar and come to a session. You just drop in. If any of you guys, you know, had college professors that did that, you just kind of come into the Zoom link, and we'll have 2 of our volunteer managers there to support you. And yeah, it's just a great resource to take advantage of. I think there was about 10 or 11 of you that your organizations have decided to move forward with completing the Service Enterprise Diagnostic. And Amanda Green, our Organizational Development Services Director, sent you guys an email on, let's see, I think yesterday, with next steps. So basically by Monday at noon, she needs you guys to share the names and email addresses of your administrator, as well as all the participants that are going to take the Service Enterprise Diagnostic. So did everyone, just by a show of hands, if you signed up for that, did you receive an email from Amanda with next steps? Okay, I see a couple. Yep. Good deal. Okay. If you're hearing this and you're like, no, we did fill out the interest form, but I didn't receive anything from Amanda, message me in the chat right now and I'll make sure that gets to you. And I'll just reiterate this. You guys know we are on like a short timeline. We're putting a lot in a few weeks because we want you guys to get the most out of it. But with that comes the need to be really responsive. So if you didn't get that information, please message me. I'm seeing a couple people chat that they did receive it as well. So great. Thank you. If you haven't been able to log into the volunteer management certificate through our learning portal, please email me as quickly as possible. Like I said, we want you to be finishing module 3 today. So if you haven't started yet, that's like 6 hours of training extra that you'll have to do next week. So email me before, even if it's after this session, so we can get you set up for the weekend if you need to work on it during that time. And then, as Ursula mentioned, we sent out a quick survey, pulse survey, before today's session, asking you guys just get a gauge of where you're at in terms of some of the content we're covering, as well as gave you a space to ask any questions that you have. Ursula's going to go over the format today, but she's going to be presenting, and then we're going to address some of your questions during the presentation. But then after that, we're really going to open it up for Q&A for specific questions you guys have. So if you did put your questions in the Google form, then no need to message those or ask us those. We will address those at some point. But if you're thinking of stuff as Ursula is sharing, throw those in the chat and I'll inbound them, and then we'll make sure during our Q&A session that those all get addressed. I think logistics-wise, that's pretty much it. Am I forgetting anything, Ursula? No, I can't hear her. Can you guys hear her?
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate your support. I was on mute, of course.
Awesome. Okay, well then I think, Ursula, we're all good to go ahead and jump in. But before we do, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. If anything I said right now just didn't make any sense, now is your time. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and jump in. All right, take it away, Ursula.
So Kevin, I think we should probably really start with the poll. I'm going to talk a little bit about today's agenda, and then we'll jump right into it. So just know today we're going to focus on why we need to coordinate volunteers in an emergency. That's a valid question because we've already got volunteers and we've already got a billion things going on. We're going to talk about effective practices before, during, and after a disaster, what an EVC is and how it can help. Also harnessing the power of affiliated folks that are with you right now, as well as spontaneous volunteers that just want to get involved and help. And then what does this mean as we're volunteering in a virtual world? So we do have a poll for you. This is a quick poll at the beginning, and we'll do a quick poll at the end just to get the pulse of your nature in the disaster world. And this is it's not a trick question. This is the disaster world, and unfortunately we use a lot of acronyms. So again, if you have no idea, that's okay, because most of us, even that work in this world forget these things on an ongoing basis. So again, the first question is, what is a COOP, C-O-O-P? Second question is, what is Cal EOS? Third question is, what is an EVC? Fourth question is, what is a social volunteer influencer? That's an interesting one. And what is volunteer match? So if you know any of those questions, great. If you don't, that's okay. We're going to make sure that you know that by the end of today.
Looks like we're almost there. 80% of people have voted, so we still have 10 more. Some of you, I think, are on phones, so that might be tricky. I'll give you another minute. Oh, I am going to ask quickly as well. If you are on the phone, you're calling in, I'm going to ask you your name so I can make sure to take your attendance really quickly since I don't have your name on here. So if you're the 155-949-58996 number, can you unmute yourself and let me know your name? If you're there. Okay. And then we also have the 805-827-8518. Couldn't hear you there. You kind of cut out. What was that? Hi, is this the 805 number?
Yes.
Who? Just can I get your first and last name and your org real quick so I can make sure you get credit for being here?
Luz Magana.
Great. And which org are you with, Luz?
I'm sorry?
Which organization are you with?
Oh, Food Share, Ventura County.
Perfect. Thank you. And then let's see if we have any other numbers here. I think those are the only two. Okay. All right, Ursula, I'm going to end this poll for everyone and show our results really quickly.
Thank you. That's why you make the big bucks.
That's it. So it looks like we're at 35% have no idea for majority for what is a COOP. I'll be honest, I don't know what that is either, so that's okay. What is Cal EOS? Some of you guys have heard of it. What is an EVC? Majority don't know, or at least have heard of it. What is a social volunteer influencer? A lot of you have heard of it. And then most of you, or a lot of you, know what volunteer match is. So great. But by the end of today, you will know, hopefully, answers to all those questions.
Yeah, actually, this is the perfect setup because those of you that are using Volunteer Match, we might have some time to talk about, ways that we can use other forms of marketing. So I'll make sure that gets included as part of the presentation, or save a little time since everyone's already kind of got in there. And the other good news is, yeah, we'll definitely be covering all those other things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully I do this right. Can you all see that by chance?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, we're just going to jump in because really we are champions of volunteering. We're champions of volunteers, but what does this really mean when it comes to emergencies? And when we look at volunteers, they really serve a vital role. As we know, with our shelters, feeding, debris, especially in our area after fires, the mudslides come and then everything's ruined, and then we need a long-term recovery process. And generally, our volunteers, our spontaneous volunteers, will jump up and want to get excited right away. So when we have safe practices in place, that's very helpful. So people feel compelled to help during a disaster. They want, again, us to reach out to them and let them know what's going on. And that happens both normally and let's say our normal environment as well as in this COVID environment. and that goes from a hands-on and virtual perspective. The difference is when we have people that are spontaneously getting involved, sometimes that can create some challenges. So individual and groups that spontaneously deploy a lot of times have their own agenda, and that's where really some challenges come in. You've seen on TV where the guy, wants to help the person that collapsed and maybe starts doing CPR and says they're a doctor. Are they really a doctor? So unfortunately, sometimes these things aren't so helpful. A great example of that is, for those of you in our beautiful Santa Barbara area, there was that unfortunate oil spill that happened in 2015. And if you take a look at this picture, these are amazing volunteers, right? These are committed community citizens that are out there helping, trying to do good. But they're maybe have gloves, maybe not. Some even had flip-flops on. I mean, they're going out to do what they think is best without the education, without the knowledge, and without the training generally of the experts in that recovery field. I'm switching to the next slide, and this is true safety procedures in place, right? I mean, they've got protective equipment. They're doing what they need to do to help in the disaster and not obviously make more challenges for the disaster. So when it really comes down to it, the reason why we need to coordinate volunteers in a disaster is really about preventing the disaster within the disaster. We want to prepare and be the solution, not another problem. And if we look at what happened with COVID-19, we talked a little bit about this the other day where, of course, right away, food banks were losing volunteers immediately because the world is saying, please stay home, and everyone said, okay, I'll stay home, I'm really nervous, and this is very scary. And then all of a sudden we had no volunteers to pack our food boxes that needed to go to our most vulnerable populations, a lot of times to our seniors and families, again, that don't have access to be able to even probably sometimes come and pick up the food. And this was a huge reality for most of us in the state and probably around the country and certainly the world. So what do we do then? We need to direct the outpouring of human resources in a way that we can manage it or create order out of chaos. We need to be able to give people an opportunity to give back and an opportunity to help in the recovery process from their own communities, but we need to be able to do it in a way that's going to benefit us. So our reality as non-government organizations is, if we can prepare, if we can have ways that they can get involved both physically as well as virtually, we'll be able to help. One of the questions, of course, that came through was the access of getting more food, right? That for their reality at their organization, they're not getting enough food that they need. So they need more donations. So how does that happen? How do we create order within that chaos, make sure those donations are coming in, but also don't overload us. If you look at like all the donations in that picture, again, that can be challenging in itself. And that's why we say sometimes there really are those disasters within the disaster, and certainly with our food insecurity, that was one. Really providing information about volunteering for disaster services focuses in 4 or 5 little areas. What are volunteers really needed for? What is the most urgent need, most important need? When and where should they come to volunteer? So again, it may be virtually. It may mean I need people hands-on. It may mean I need them on Saturdays to help direct traffic during a food distribution pickup. So again, you need to be very clear with your volunteers, especially in times of disaster. What they're going to be doing, again, what's the work that they're going to be involved in? What do volunteers need to bring with them? Sometimes we're very lucky, and those spontaneous volunteers show up with a truckload, and they have protective equipment, and they have chainsaws, and they have everything needed to do what they think is the job, but that may not be a safe practice or a volunteer opportunity that you need them to do at this time. And so it would have been nice if you told them, well, I need you to wear closed-toed shoes, I need you to bring your own gloves and masks because we don't have them, and I need you to make sure that you have a water bottle that you can refill because we've got water but we don't have cups, or because of our COVID practices we're not providing certain things. So it's really important, especially during a disaster or an emergency, that you are very clear with what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, where they're going to do it, and what's needed for that. So that's really important. Also, again, most volunteers are pretty savvy now, but letting them know what the conditions are like in response to most of the food banks or the organizations. In this case, of course, warehouse can be cold or warm. I mean, you kind of need to, have those layers that you can pull on and put off. But if you're outside and you're doing maybe you're directing traffic or helping distribute the food with those drive-through pickups, it might be a rainy day, it might be, again, a super sunny day, and what does that mean for that volunteer? How do they really need to prepare? Again, being as clear as possible and over-communicating is really what it comes down to. So I wanted to just bring up poor Butte County is back in the fire situation. This actually is a headline from last year. Might have even been around this time. Gosh, the time just goes so fast. But I remember last year when they had their fires that this came out, and this literally was the slogan in the news was. Campfire donation sites asking America to stop sending us your old stuff. So literally, stop doing it. So if we think about when donations are needed and not needed, again, creating that disaster in the disaster, most of us go, oh gosh, people were in a fire, they need our clothes, so we go to our closet and we grab everything that we've never worn and don't think that we'll ever wear again and throw that in a bag. And then we go to our pantry and we grab every can in the way back of our pantry that we've never ate because it really doesn't go with any of our meals and it's just still sitting there, and we put that in a bag. And then we go around into our kids' room and go, what toys have they not used or we don't like anymore, and we throw that into the bag. That is our human nature. We want to give, but we're giving of normally things that people don't really need, or honestly, it's older stuff, and that when you've lost, I have not, so I can't, say from a first-hand experience, but I had a friend that lost their house in the fires in San Diego, gosh, now many years ago. They didn't want that kind of stuff. They didn't want any donations. What they wanted was a safe place to put their family. What they wanted was a meal with their family and maybe concentrate on something else. And if someone gave them a gift card that they could go do that, i.e. that they could go to Target or wherever they're going and buy the shirt that they want, or they could use that gift card to go to, down to the pizza place and get a nice meal for their family together, that's what they needed. They didn't need our old stuff. So Kevin, I'm going to unshare here, stop sharing, but if you could play that video, this is just a great way that Butte County presented what they did and did not need in a really respectful and professional way.
Following the campfire. Butte County has been the recipient of an abundance of generosity during our time of need following the campfire. It is truly amazing to see the kindness that pours into our community following a disaster such as this. At this time, our donations are at capacity, amazingly, thanks to you.
Amazing amount of generosity. People sent stuff from all over the country.
If you would still like to contribute, we would urge that you consider a monetary donation to a local organization, a trusted organization, so that you can avoid any potential scams. Monetary donations are the easiest to manage, and they ensure that you will meet the need of the community. The North Valley Community Foundation has multiple campaigns available online right now for the campfire. You can visit their website at nvcf.org. Additionally, animal shelters are requesting no more donations at this time, and instead requesting a monetary donation to the North Valley Animal Disaster Group, which can be found at nvadg.org. We appreciate the tremendous support from the American Red Cross and the Salvation Army, who are also accepting donations at their websites. An initial list of trusted local organizations can be found at ButteCountyRecovers.org. This list will be growing as additional sources become available. And again, thank you.
So if you look at that video, again, they show the amount of donations, which is amazing that they got. They thank the amazing volunteers and community members that came and gave those, but they also provide a very clear cut that they don't, the statement is, I don't need any more of this kind of stuff. And if you have things, there are other organizations that need these things, and here's where to go. Obviously, funding and making a donation is the #1 way that anyone can help in a disaster, absolutely. Doesn't matter what organization it is. We know that once you get the dollars in your door, your organization, whatever your role is, you can utilize those funds for what is the most urgent need at this time. And obviously clothes may not be, but water is, or animal toys, but you get to make that decision because you are the experts in your organization. So it was a really nice way to say no, but to provide opportunities for people to still get involved. Does that make sense? We don't want to say you can't volunteer. We don't want to say you can't get involved. What we want to say is this is the way you can really help. And understanding what those ways that people can help with your organization is so important. So understanding that this is, ONOC cannot take tons of donations, so we're not donations management when it comes to an emergency. We have the Salvation Army, we have the Goodwill. Both of those organizations have trucks and are used to managing lots of donations that deal with, you know, whether it's food or clothes or furniture, I mean, as well as obviously, you know, funding. So you want to be able to partner with or get to know organizations that you can direct the stuff that you don't need to the right places. And so for here at ONOC, we actually have a list of organizations. So, and this didn't happen in this instance with COVID-19. Of course, people weren't driving and knocking down our doors, but we have in the past with our fires. When people drive up to our location, we will have a person standing out at our little drive-up area and ask why they're there. And generally, if they're there to donate something, which has happened, we hand them a flyer that says, actually, we don't accept donations here. Here are the locations that you can go to. Here are our partner nonprofit organizations that will really help. So getting the word out with a video, getting the word out in the press, getting the word out physically handing a piece of paper or posting it on your door. These are the ways that you can, again, engage volunteers in the right way for what works for you, but not get overrun, overwhelmed, and honestly create a disaster within the disaster. So I hope that that helps, because I thought they did such a great job. I'm so sorry, Butte County, that you're back in this situation again. I also know that we've made mistakes as emergency organizers, and sometimes our leftover donation supplies we ship to other emergencies, which if we didn't want it, again, I don't think the new emergency wants it either. So if you're not asked to donate, if you're not told to donate, don't donate. But you can always, of course, do that from a philanthropy perspective, because funding, you know, cash is king, really, and especially in emergencies. So I'm going to skip to our second section and really just talk about some effective practices during, before, during, and after a disaster. And, you know, we've kind of touched upon them slightly. So the first thing is to get prepared, and we just talked about that. So one of the things that comes out no matter what, and this is a dumb story, but my husband is in the pool industry, and we do not have a pool at our house because, of course, he doesn't want to take care of it and doesn't do it. His friend was a firefighter, and I can tell you that I went over to his house all the time, and they didn't even have a first aid kit in their house when my son got hurt. Whatever we do, we don't usually want to do at home, but in this case, it's really key for your organization, for you and your employees, your colleagues, your volunteers to be prepared themselves. And they say you should have like a 3-day kit. To be honest with you, especially in California, if we really get, earthquakes like we're due, the freeways are going to go down. We're going to be cut off from everything, and you really need to have more like a 7-day kit. You need to be able to survive by yourself at least for 7 days. So please make sure if you don't have a personal kit, if you don't have a kit, at your office, to make sure that is part of your preparedness plan, because we can't help other people unless we can help ourselves. I was in a phone call, a pretend emergency, and the last time we did, let's say, a countywide emergency practice, it was related around having a tidal wave. So there was a big earthquake off Japan. A wave came to Southern California, and now now the warnings are going out, and I got the phone call from the Emergency Operations Center to activate, and start getting prepared to engage volunteers in different ways. So they called me on the phone, and they said, "What do you do, Ursula? What's your first step?" And I said, "Well, I live in San Clemente. So my first step is I'm going to hang up this phone, I'm going to grab my kit, and I'm going to go to higher ground because I got to get out of here." And this is a real world. It's supposed to be a real world, right? We're supposed to act exactly the way we're supposed to. So, a couple minutes later, they go, "Okay, well, let's start over again. Let's pretend you were at work, and we'll go through this process." But the truth is, we have to protect ourselves first in order to be able to help other people. And we're helping people all the time, but being prepared. The other area that I'm really going to encourage you with, and this was one of the questions, was what is a COOP? So a COOP is a continuity of operations plan, right? Continuity of operations plan, because when we are down, meaning when disaster happens, how does our organization continue to survive during a disaster or during a pandemic? So the COOP is a very structured, a very detailed, I'm going to say, here's my binder, right? Here's my binder. It's got lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff in it. And it can be something that, again, is on your shelf. The good news is if you start using those resources by FEMA and you start putting together your continuation plan, you really will have some real-world exercises that you've done with your organization, with your staff and volunteers, and also how you're working with other agencies. So this is really good. It's easy to read, and it's step-by-step, fill in this, think about this. But it's long, and it takes time. But if we're talking about how to really get prepared and looking at, of course, disasters, hopefully no more pandemics in the future, we need to have these types of things, because you need to have a plan. If your organization, again, the building starts to fall in, or no one can get to your organization because the roads are closed, how are you going to work? What's going to happen? And how will you work in different ways, which we have definitely adjusted as a sector from a virtual perspective. So again, getting prepared. For 1OC, we think of preparedness when we're talking about volunteers all the time. And this is really our continuum. You know, Taproot put out a really nice visual of like how we should engage volunteers and what kind of levels. And we tweaked it a little bit just because we believe that when you start with a hands-on opportunity, which most of us are involved in normally, and then move to more engaging our volunteers from a skill-based perspective, including getting them involved with committees and task forces, that the funding's going to come, right? The funding's going to be there because they are invested in our organization. They are part of our team, and we've moved them through that continuum and built a relationship which in most cases, they're not going to leave us. They're going to be the first person out there when we're having problems, when we are in a disaster, to say, hey, ONEOC needs help, or Orange County Food Bank needs help, or Working Wardrobes burnt down right before the pandemic. Their whole organization burnt down, and then boom, there's a pandemic. We need help. Those volunteers are going to step up and make a difference. So just know, when we think about the COOP, when we're putting together any types of business resiliency plans, we're always thinking from this perspective, because we can't hire more staff. And in this case, and I'm sure many of you in this COVID environment, you know, reductions in staff because of our incomes have gone down. Staff has been on furlough. We're doing way more with less staff. Well, the only way that we can continue and hopefully survive to thrive is by engaging more volunteers at this time, not less. So when we think about our plans, this snapshot really is key to that success, because there's a lot more people I can get involved from a volunteer perspective in all of these areas than I can to hire staff. It's just not going to happen, and certainly right now, not with COVID. The other way is to get engaged. So there is a Northern California VOAD, which is Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. For some reason, Orange County calls it COAD, Collaborating Organizations Active in Disaster. We like to change everything, you know, like we don't want to be the same as anyone, apparently. But we have a Southern California VOAD and a Northern California VOAD, which is where these organizations are coming together to have conversations, to learn about each other, what you do, what I do, what you can do, what you can't do, and get ready to be able to work together when we have these types of situations. So there's government volunteer organizations like Citizen Corps. There's our CERT professionals, which, you know, are community emergency response teams. So there's all these folks that are doing stuff, and these people are motivated, man. I work with these guys for like the last 10 years, and they are ready to help in a disaster. I mean, you know, when it starts to get warm and the Santa Ana winds are coming, you know, I'm getting calls of, do we need to be activated? What can we do? How can we help? The good news is you've got a workforce of people out there that are ready to respond. The bad news is sometimes they're a little, you know, a little too excited to respond in the disaster. So again, managing those types of volunteers can be a little bit more challenging. And the other way, as you all know, and I'm just throwing it out the obvious, is, you know, to get training. I mean, Red Cross does amazing training. You know, I mean, there's things all around the state. I would say as far as trainings go, probably emergency or disaster trainings are the most that are available, especially for free. Like there's tons of online, there's, you know, I get things all the time that says, oh, join us, come, you know, and most of the time it's little or no cost. Some that have costs usually have some types of scholarships. So there really isn't any reason why we can't, you know, train our staffs, our volunteers, or get more training that we can bring back to give to those staff and volunteers. It's just looking for those. And if you're interested in finding more organizations, you know, again, we can connect you with that. California Volunteers certainly, you know, has tons and tons of connections. So that's really important. Really going back to my next slide is utilizing your resources, because California Volunteers is great. So Cal EOS, another one of our lovely little questions. that is the California Operations Emergency Services. So again, when we say here's the state, you know, we've got our governor, we've got the California Volunteers, which is focusing on the engagement of volunteers, you know, for our state. Now we've got Cal EOS that's focusing on more the, you know, emergency services, the disaster side. These are amazing people. You know, I've only been involved in this specific arena for the last 10 years, but before my tenure here with 1OC, I was with the YMCA, where we really were an emergency shelter. We're at the base of Big Bear, and so of course there's always fires there and people are evacuating. So I was always doing things from a programmatic side. And honestly, like every time I call someone, they're always willing to share information. They're always willing to tell me when the next training is, when the next meeting is. They got a lot of meetings in the disaster world, but these are resources to us. Of course, FEMA, their side, they've got tons of resources. They've got grants. If you're connected in some way, a lot of times there's federal reimbursement for your organization. So these are important things. For us, the Orange County Emergency Operations Center, nice little building on the top of one of our smaller mountains, and you know, they've got all the communications, they've got all the resources to connect throughout Orange County and help you. So again, there's lots of resources available, but that's really, you know, during those disasters, we've got to utilize them. But we also have to know about them. You know, it's really hard to jump into the pandemic, or God forbid, you're evacuating because the fire's coming down the road, or, you know, worse, you know, you got school shooting. I mean, there's so many things that have come up in California as well as, you know, around our nation that are true, you know, emergencies and disasters. And it's hard to think through and make plans at that time. That's why it's so important to have these plans in place, or have a plan in place, to have resources lists in place, and know who these people are. Because, I mean, I could literally pick up the phone and call someone at Cal EOS today, and, you know, and they would know who I am, and they'd know if I was calling, I really need their help. You know, so you want to build those relationships, because just like in any other situation, it's so much easier to work with someone who knows who you are, who knows what you do, and there's trust there, right? I mean, that's huge. And you're going to get things a lot quicker. And if they can't give it to you, they're probably going to get you to the right person that can. So, you know, I can't say that enough. You know, again, when we're talking about before, during, and even after, you know, it really is about planning. One of the resources, somebody, you know, was asking about safe practices. This was one of the first things that came out from California Volunteers with their new initiative. This was great. Immediately, you know, we sent this out to our nonprofit organizations. Immediately, we sent these out to our volunteers. We use this. I mean, it's a great visual, but it's safe practices. You want to be able to have these resources at the tip of your hand, and knowing, you know, having that website, you know, clicked on your favorites is important, because there's new things that come out all the time. So again, being able to access those resources and be able to communicate that now to the next level, now I can easily share that with my volunteers and let them know this is how we're going to be handling social distancing, because this is how the state is handling social distancing, and our county also agrees. So that's really nice. The other thing is, of course, after, and I don't have to tell you guys this. I mean, this is our world that we're in right now. Unfortunately, usually we're waiting till after the emergency before we pivot, before we revise, before we review and change things. Right now, in our COVID environment, I mean, this might even be happening daily for you, and I'm sorry that that's the case, but that's the reality that we're in. So making sure that, again, you're over-communicating to people, making sure that if you revise something or you improve it, which is probably the case, you're like, oh, we need to do this differently because, and now you have a better plan for it, just make sure people know about it. Make sure your volunteers, your staff, your colleagues, and even your leadership, if they we're not involved in the process. You know, understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. That is the most important thing, you know, that I can say in times of disaster, just because we don't communicate enough, and we either have to make decisions faster, which is unfortunate sometimes because we don't have all the information, but once we make that decision, you know, that consequence, now we need to, again, review and revise and maybe replan and come up with another option, you know, for the future. So I hate to apologize, you know, for me, literally, not making the right decision, but I believe that making a decision that you felt was best at the time in an emergency situation is more important than not making a decision. And hopefully I don't get anyone hurt. Hopefully I'm, you know, following most, you know, I'm most educated about what the plan is and the way the organization would like me to make that decision. But it is important sometimes that we have to make those decisions. So, you know, again, when we're talking about before, during, and after a disaster, you know, normally we're doing debriefs and talking about what happened and what we could do differently. In this case, we're probably doing that a lot. And if you aren't doing that, you might want to think of scheduling maybe, you know, like a 15-minute with your staff and volunteers to talk about anything that maybe did change or that should change, because that little mini huddle, that 15 minutes in your life, probably is going to make your organization and your programs just so much smoother in the long run. So I'm going to pause there to see if we have, you know, just any questions related to, you know, resources or certainly why we need to, you know, engage these volunteers in a disaster, or why we end up creating disasters and disasters. You know, if there's anything that we need to provide more context to right now, we certainly can.
Anyone have any questions so far? We had a few questions coming, Ursula, but I think they'd probably be better for towards the end. Looks like someone just put in the chat. Important to note, when we call for able-bodied, this may create exclusion. You see that comment, Ursula, from Anna?
Can you read it for me?
Yeah, when we call for able bodies, this may create exclusion. We may want to use a better word for calling volunteers, so it's not exclusive.
You know, those are the kind of things that need to be discussed a lot. So I think we probably make more dumb choices when we're in the emergency, and that's why when we're putting together our plans, not only having plans on how we are going to get able-bodied, you know, if you want to use that term, involved, but more importantly, how we're going to support the folks that aren't, and who are the contacts that can make that happen. I know, you know, when we were talking about that 3-day plan, and of course the meals that the folks weren't getting, it's really challenging to make sure that we're focusing on more connections with those folks. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit more with the virtual volunteering, because this is one of the probably the best virtual volunteer activities right now, is reaching out to people, calling people on the phone, seeing if they're okay, but creating those small networks to be able to deal with all those different populations. So again, the seniors that are homebound, folks with true disabilities that can't move and can't get out, or God forbid, you know, again, we have the earthquake and they can get out, but there's nowhere to go because now everything's kind of cut off. Do we have a support network? Do we have a group of volunteers that can help and make sure those folks are okay? So if they're your regular clients or they're your regular staff and volunteers, how are we communicating with them, and how are we getting in touch with them, connecting with them to make sure they have everything they need? So yes, language is absolutely important, and how you choose to not only set up that plan, communicate that plan in the right way so you are respecting and talking to the right audience in the right way. Yeah, I mean, 150%. And the other piece of that is making sure that there are volunteers that are going to be a part of that process. So like I said, right now, probably the best virtual opportunity, if you don't have any right now, is getting people that are ambassadors of your organization and doing outreach calls to clients or folks that you feel maybe are more critical in need. And we don't have connections right now anyways, so even if they're, let's say, not homebound, we're all homebound in a lot of ways. So once you've decided or felt that first wave, okay, these are our critical clients that we want to make sure that they have basic needs, food, water, medicine, access to health care, in the way that they need it. Okay, great, they're okay. Then the next level is the rest of the folks. It's like, okay, so they haven't talked to anyone either. How do we keep those dialogues going? So good point. Yeah, I think there's some great resources. There's always debates on what is the right words to use, what's not the right words to use, but putting that in your initial plan and having those crucial conversations with your team and your organization, because not everyone may agree, is important. And then once you guys have decided or agreed on what that is, then making sure that your partners understand and agree with what you're putting out there. Because of course, as ONEOC, we don't want to talk about social justice in a way that we aren't being true to ONEOC and what we do here and why we do what we do. So we're not going to put a statement out and then all of a sudden our other partners that we work with are like, why did you say that? You guys don't even do that, and why would you even get involved in that conversation? Well, no, you're right. So we need to have the right conversation first at our organization and then talk to our partners and make sure it resonates with them. So that way, again, when we're in that emergency, when we're in that situation, everyone understands what we're doing, why we're doing it, and communicating in the right way. So there isn't miscommunication. Again, there's that over-communication. Hope that makes sense. Any other questions?
Hi, sorry for just a second. My question is is there any like specific material resources, like a PDF or anything like that we can use to give to our administration to kind of help them through a disaster preparedness plan?
Yeah, the great news on the disaster side, there's a billion PDFs and trifolds and insert, forms here, you insert your name. So if at the end of this, if you're interested in those types of resources, please make sure that you put your name in the chat for that, just say resources, and we'll make sure, well, actually, we can send it out to everyone anyways. We'll link you with the major ones, and then, of course, once you get to the major ones, those ones can help you to dive down to even more of a local level. Just like we're talking about CalEOS, FEMA, VOAD, Citizen Corps, all those kind of things. They're national in nature, but have local affiliates, and usually each county has all of those. There might even be each city has those, depending on how your setup is or how rural your organization is located. Any other questions in this section? Okay, well, I'm going to just move on to our third poll question. So what is an EVC and how can it help? So an EVC is an emergency volunteer center. So an emergency volunteer center provides a specific location where volunteers can either physically or virtually. In most cases, I think we were trained, for the physical, and now we're in the virtual, to help match with urgent needs. So, for example, your organization has volunteers, your organization needs volunteers to pack food boxes. and you normally have a sign up that's going on and you're fine. The pandemic happens, all of a sudden groups have canceled and you're in need of more volunteers. Where do you go? Of course, you can start posting, and posting on Volunteer Match is important, and making sure that people know, you know, from a marketing perspective, that you're in need of volunteers. Reaching out to your groups, yes, we can, as emergency volunteer centers, be that additional resource to keep pushing. So for us here in Orange County, we were actually activated by the County of Orange, which meant in March 17th, I think it was officially, that we reverted more resources to supporting your organizations than we ever had. Normally, we are a membership organization where people join, nonprofits join as members by training and lots of different resources as part of your membership. In this case, there's no membership, there's no anything, it's just how can we help you? So from that perspective, some people we are on the phone with and we're posting projects for them, and then we're sending it out to the media and letting people know that there's a need. Sometimes we're helping people learn how to do that themselves, how to post projects and do more. But it really is up to that agency and the support that they need. So it could be we do it all for them, or we just help them a little bit, or they already know what to do and they have time and they're doing it themselves. So the Emergency Volunteer Center is really a backup to your volunteer needs, and it's based on us trying to make those right matches. So in a non-pandemic world, with things like 9/11, even, you know, again, the oil, you know, spill in 2015 in Santa Barbara, again, there was a convergence of volunteers, which was great that people want to help, but how do we get them to help that really helps us? So they send them to, you know, places like emergency volunteer centers so that we can put them into buckets and go, okay, well, these people have skills, these people have trucks, these people, you know, can do administration, these people can do heavy lifting, you know, so getting them ready so that when you ask, hey, I need 10 volunteers to, you know, to help me pack food boxes, or I need, you know, 50 volunteers to go out and unfortunately, you know, say, scoop the mud away, you know, from our building. Those are the kind of opportunities that we will help and get you those folks. You still do all the training. You still decide if you want that person. So if they show up and they're not the right person for you, it's absolutely up to you and your organization. We're just trying to make it easier for you, and we're trying to really be the outreach and the marketing to supersize what you guys are currently doing. So sometimes it works really fantastically in this COVID environment. Sometimes it's more challenging, but since we've been activated, we certainly have engaged thousands of volunteers, and these are both hands-on as well as virtual folks in all different types of areas, including skill-based folks that are helping with more you know, things like technology and marketing and those types of needs. So an emergency volunteer center can be, again, a backup for you, not only from getting more volunteers, but also just spreading the word of what you need, you know, from a outreach perspective. So if you've never heard of one, and you don't know if there's one in your area, there's lots of volunteer centers around the state. We certainly can get you connected to the volunteer center, and then they can tell you if they're an official emergency volunteer center or not. But from a volunteer center perspective, they're going to be able to help in some way, at least be able, again, to tell you what they can and cannot do for you. So our emergency volunteer center can be a virtual or walk-in, as I mentioned. This is kind of like a normal walk-in, but really let's go to the virtual because that's what we're all dealing with. And right now everything's handled for us in a platform called Hands-On Connect. So we have a section for volunteers to sign up for things. We have a section for nonprofits to post. you know, their needs, and obviously volunteer opportunities. And then we have a special section for disaster that helps to talk to all those audiences and narrow it down. Especially like the media, sometimes people are asking, you know, about how many volunteers, you know, have you engaged? What are the biggest needs? How can we, you know, how can we help you push this information out? We'll even have a section for the media, so that way they can just kind of grab that information and go, especially if there's a call out for something. This is probably not relative to you, you probably don't care, but we literally have a structure for the Emergency Volunteer Center. And if you see at the top, Tim Stroud, he's our Chief Executive Officer. He runs our show here at 10C, but he also is the EOC Director, which is the Emergency Operations Center Director for 10C, which then above him is the county, right? So we have the County Emergency Operations Center. They tell us or tell Tim, hey, activate, and then boom, we start getting all of these different volunteers involved. The reason why we have a structure, again, a planned structure, so we planned this, is so when there is an emergency, when, I mean, we didn't think there'd be a pandemic, but when there is an emergency, that we can have more volunteers helping to do and get and provide for your organizations than we normally do. So, and to make sure that if we do get overloaded, if we get too many calls, too many emails, that there are backups upon backups available to us. So we're lucky that we've been training a very long time, probably not exactly, you know, as much on the virtual side, but we did have a virtual platform that was set up, and honestly that was because of California Volunteers and Cal EOS. Way back in the day there was a grant for that, and I had a lovely skill-based volunteer that came over and set the whole thing up for me, never thinking that I'd have to push the button while I was still working for 10C, but I did, you know, and thank you. I really, I don't know, Gilbert is probably not on this call, but I do need to send him a really big gift basket because he really did save my life, and literally it was about 10 years ago. But that was a grant. Again, you know, that was no cost to us. It was because that was a resource available, and luckily we took advantage of it because, boy, I can't even imagine what this would be like without what he did for us. So then just, you know, real quickly.
Ursula?
Yeah.
Sorry. You're on a roll, but we can't see the slides, and I didn't want to interrupt, but I'm not sure if you were clicking through them, and that's what we were.
Can you see the slide now?
No, I don't think you're sharing your screen.
I'm gonna reshare my screen.
Yep, there we go. Now we can.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, so I'm gonna show you that beautiful org chart that you don't want to see. How about that, right? And now let's jump to our cadre. So just know that our disaster cadre is really about, again, that next level of volunteers. And unfortunately, they normally don't have a lot to do, right? And that's a challenge. How do you keep volunteers engaged when there isn't a lot to do? But we do trainings with them. You know, we go through different scenarios, including the tidal wave, right? There's those kind of things, as well as we try and make sure that they know what the big needs are in Orange County with our nonprofits for volunteers. So they may want to do that themselves, or they might want to do that with other folks, and that really comes to our next let's say, poll question. You know, what is a spontaneous, unaffiliated volunteer? SUVs, you know, are our disaster cadre, even though they're not spontaneous, they are set up to deal with spontaneous people. And in our emergency, we even had some people that weren't part of the cadre at the beginning of the pandemic, and sometimes still, you know, we get maybe a couple every once in a while that want to be involved in the disaster cadre. So they were spontaneous, and we do real-time training with them and get them deployed and activated right away. So that's really important. But they really support our critical needs. They help with the donation side as well, and they can post volunteer opportunities. They can reach out, to different networks that they have. The best thing is that they become, especially with our COVID environment, our social volunteer influencers. So our SVIs, really they're there to push to their networks and to constantly tell people what the biggest need was. So again, when the food bank at the beginning needed volunteers, we contacted county, we contacted our investor cadre, and then everyone started sending out the word that, hey, volunteers are needed. There was a new organization, Delivering with Dignity, that was kind of like the Grubhub situation, driving to restaurants, picking up food, and then taking them out to their most vulnerable clients. And boom, it's like, we sent that out, and right away our disaster cadre or our social volunteer influencers are spreading the word because they have networks, they have their own, Facebooks and LinkedIn. So there are people out there that really can help. That disaster cadre member may be feeling that they're uncomfortable doing a hands-on project, but they've got 20, 30, 40 friends that they can reach out to that may, one of them or 10 of them or all of them might not be. So just know, everyone's at a different place in this pandemic. And of course, the most important thing, is to make people feel comfortable and safe, but having them be your ambassadors, having them be what we call our social volunteer influencers has been huge. In fact, when I get off this call, I'm doing one, a shout out to all the disaster cadre members, because next week we're doing a training or trying to engage more skill-based volunteers for our nonprofits, especially as we look at recovery efforts. How can they utilize people in marketing and finance and efficiencies? And I want to make sure that they're, if one of the disaster cadre, certainly, they can join, and that's fine, but I want to make sure that they're sending it out to their networks, letting them know, hey, now is the time, we need people, mostly virtually, right, that can help us solve some big issues that our nonprofits are dealing with right now, and we need your help, we need your time, your talent. Please join us at this next webinar. So our final, area, and then we'll just talk a little bit about virtual volunteering, is really about the harnessing the power of the affiliated and spontaneous volunteers. People ask a lot about recruitment. How do we get these volunteers? How does it work? Just again, real quickly, there is a difference between affiliated and spontaneous. Affiliated are volunteers that are connected with you. They're trained in some way. They know what to do in most cases. They're your volunteer network, right? They're affiliated with you and your organization. Spontaneous volunteers are people that want to help. They might have, skills that they can have. They might just walk into your building. They might call you. They might, click on your posting and they're ready to go, but you haven't worked with them yet. So that's the difference in the disaster world. Again, this is, the way that we talk, affiliated and spontaneous volunteers. From an emergency volunteer center perspective, we're always dealing with spontaneous volunteers. As one OC, we have lots of affiliated volunteers, right? We've got people helping us in all kinds of areas. So the biggest area, and you guys mentioned it earlier, you got to get your stuff on Volunteer Match. Having volunteers trained to do this for you is fantastic. Again, if you have a team of virtual volunteers that know how to post on Volunteer Match for you, how easy is that to change things up, to push something out, to get things going? A Volunteer Match is an amazing platform always, and we've used it, kind of from the beginning, even though we're on another system. But now our Hands-On Connect system connects into the Volunteer Match. So now when I create a post on my system, it actually is creating the post on the Volunteer Match. And to be honest with you, that's only because of California Volunteers, because they saw the need to be able to integrate this so that we can be more effective and efficient. So, thanks to them. But again, that's one of those resources. And this is an amazing resource because you can search for there's a special COVID area. California Volunteers is making sure that it is the priority. So when people are searching themselves and they don't know anything, but they're searching your area, or maybe they're searching animals, or maybe they're searching food, again, this kind of stuff is going to come up first. And that's because the California Volunteers really, again, building the right relationship with Volunteer Match. You know, having those partnerships, knowing who you are, and working those kind of things out really helps. Now, was this set up before the pandemic? No. Would it have been more efficient if it was? Sure, because we'd all been trained and know what we're doing, and wouldn't that have been wonderful? But this was one of the first things that came out of the pandemic that has changed our organization for sure, especially with that integration. So just know, you know, besides the fact that we're all learning to work virtual in many different ways that we didn't in the past, you know, there's a lot of good that comes out of these disasters, especially when we're reviewing and going through our next steps. On that note, we really wanted to go back to some of the questions that kind of came out, and I'm just going to kind of talk through the questions, maybe some of them we've already covered, but just make sure that we haven't missed anything. There was two areas really that it seemed to fall into. It seemed to fall under recruitment and then also engagement. So again, what specific questions did you have? First one was, what's the best way to recruit volunteers during times of disaster? Well, number one, yeah, getting your posting on Volunteer Match. Making sure you know what type of volunteer you're looking for. So we call it the stick figure. You know, it's like, okay, who would be the ideal person to help you? Some people said, hey, gosh, we used to have a lot of seniors volunteering with us, and now we don't. Well, yes, I would say that that specific population is a higher risk in COVID, but that doesn't mean that there aren't folks that are let's say active older adults that are still engaging and volunteering. So you need to know who you're reaching out to and why, and try and get to those particular networks. We geomap kind of where the projects are, and then look at what's surrounding that. I mean, ideally in a couple mile radius, but sometimes we go 5 or 10 if we're not finding, you know, what we need. But we're looking for faith-based organizations. So if we, and I'm going to use Working Wardrobes, you know, poor Jerry, I love her. She's the CEO, founder of that organization, just an amazing lady. So if you're on the call, Jerry, you're the best, and I'm using you as an example. So like I said, Working Wardrobes literally burnt down. Then the pandemic happened, and then they needed everything, right? You know, so what do? You look around that area and go, okay, who's in that radius? What faith-based organizations are there? What other nonprofits are there? What schools are there? Now, granted, they may not have been in class, but there might have been a way to contact their network, right, to send out the call, because that's localized. Those are people that can get to that location pretty easy. And if you start with that, it makes it a little bit easier. Again, not everyone, again, is coming to their businesses or faith-based, organizations or even, schools at this time. But you can build those relationships and hopefully get on their newsletter, get on their network if they've got like a phone tree or some kind of email tree that's going out. And that really makes a big difference. The other side of that is, again, building those relationships with the county, because again, media and county can push things out. So if you have relationships with local papers, if you have relationships with the county emergency services, you can let them know what your needs are, which they probably want to know that, because they're talking about that all the time. They're probably just not talking to you directly. And so if you're reaching out to them, that is going to save them time as well as build that relationship. So just know there's folks greater than us that have access to even make a stronger statement, including California Volunteers. People ask me, oh, will they push things out? Absolutely. You just got to reach out to them and let them know, hey, this is, this is a urgent need. What can you do to help me to push this and share this, with my community or the county or the city that I'm in? So please know that, everyone is, especially right now, is willing to help you, but you've got to, in a lot of cases, make the first step. I get calls all the time like, oh, what's the biggest need? I keep saying, it's food. The organizations that I see posted the most in the Emergency Volunteer Center aren't all food organizations, but they're all asking for food-related items. Hey, I need help, packing this. I need help, if people can bring more staple items like, proteins and peanut butter and things of that nature. Can you get that into me? So we tell, let's say, the next level up, the county and the state that, but they really would rather hear from you, the organizations that are literally dealing with the situation. How can I motivate volunteers to come back? So that's a great question, and we're dealing with that all the time, whether there's a pandemic or not. In this particular situation with the pandemic, please make sure that you are providing safe practices, because that's going to make people feel comfortable. And again, getting to know your volunteers is the way that they come back. The reason why they don't come back is because they either had a bad experience, they were fearful, they got scared of the environment that they were in. That might be their normal personality, or it might be because of everything that's going on with COVID, or they weren't having any interaction. And I can give you an example. I've been at some large, food organizations, and they have great volunteers that are running projects, and the volunteers come and they start packing and sorting produce, and they're doing lots of work. But then the volunteer coordinators are sitting in the office and not having any conversations with these volunteers. I can tell you your volunteer leads are 100% involved in making sure the work gets done and in the right way. They're not necessarily always thinking about how to make the volunteer feel the best, get excited, get motivated, want to come back. Even though they had a good experience and they were busy the whole time, they may have not talked to anyone for 2 hours when they were at your location. So just remember, there needs to be real engagement, human interaction, human conversation. So as a volunteer coordinator, if you're out there on the floor, walk around and go, hey, how's it going? Oh, I saw you came last Thursday. Oh, it's so great that you're back. I mean, you need to build that relationship and become, again, they need to be part of your network. They need to be your friends. They need to feel like a part of your organization's family. So that's the best way, you can motivate volunteers to come back is to recognize them, talk to them, and engage with them, because then they feel like they're a part of your organization, and they're not going to leave your organization when they feel like they're a part of the family. In terms of engagement, we also talked a lot about risk management, and that's really the next area that we'll concentrate on. Let me go ahead and click on this. You might have seen a version of this in terms of risk management. There's 4 ways to kind of look at risk, and you can either transfer the risk to someone else. You can avoid it, like, hey, we're not going to have volunteers in our organization. We're not doing any hands-on. Or you reduce it, right? You say, okay, well, we're going to have volunteers in our organization, but we're going to make sure that they're 6 feet apart. We're going to make sure the stations have, all of the PPE equipment that's important. We're going to have gloves and masks and sanitizers, and then after every shift, we're going to clean the floor. So you reduce it, or you accept it, and you just say, hey, we have to do it this way because this is the only way we can do it, and based on what our county and our state says, and how we need to get our business done, we're now accepting those consequences of what's going on. And those are hard things. Right now, our biggest challenge, or let's say our biggest area of opportunity is reducing, right? Rather than avoiding, because avoiding means we're not getting those donations, we're not getting those volunteers in. Transferring it to another organization, well, then we're overwhelming them. And if we accept it without looking at risk, probably we're going to end up, possibly getting exposed to COVID, possibly exposing people to COVID, and we can't be there. So really right now in the pandemic, it's about reducing the risk, doing as much as we can to follow social distancing practices, best practices that folks in our immediate industry are doing. So if you know a food bank that's open, contact that food bank, find out what they're doing, how they're doing it, what rules, what procedures do they have in place, how many managers do they have overseeing those kind of things, because those are best practices in your sector, and you can put those practices, you know, in place almost immediately. I'm going to just real quickly, you know, do a shout out to the Orange County Food Bank again and Second Harvest Food Bank, two organizations that do amazing work in our county. Now, Second Harvest Food Bank, when the pandemic started, kind of moved to, again, more of a weekend or pickup model. So they weren't having groups of volunteers come in and pack, or let's say, companies and other community groups come in. They probably had volunteers inside their organization. They're very tight, you know, affiliated ones that are specifically doing stuff, but they weren't having groups show up and volunteer. On the flip side, the Orange County Food Bank did have groups that were coming in, so they did set up social distancing procedures. Excuse me. The one thing that I thought was really unique and a great idea for anybody is they actually created a position that was a social distance monitor. So they created another volunteer position from a hands-on perspective, but this person's now in charge of making sure everyone still is social distancing, following the rules, and making sure everyone's safe. I would feel, if I was a nervous person, I would feel so much better knowing that that's all that person is doing. They're there to make sure that I'm safe. And what a great opportunity that was for another volunteer opportunity. You know, so you have to decide, so sorry, you have to decide what works best for you and what your organization is comfortable with. But again, there's a lot of practices out there now that people are doing that are working, and we're getting better at it, right? We're getting to be even more efficient at it. You know, just real quick, I mean, here's some of our urgent needs. Again, you know, thousands of volunteers out there that have really done hands-on work. I think our main thing for us is we Zoom, we do training through Zoom, we try and engage people in a lot of different ways, and then get to find out what their comfort level is, and then try and connect them with the right opportunity for them. If it's virtual, it's virtual, but if it's hands-on, let's get them to those organizations that need people right away. We did that, you know, literally, and are doing that right now with our 9/11 Day of Service, and we had a community cup, a charity challenge. We challenged companies to connect with their local nonprofit in some way. So call your food bank and see, do they need money? Do they need donations? Do they need your time, both virtually or hands-on? And go and help them. And we're giving out prizes for it on Monday, so hopefully that'll go well. We'll see. We have some technological issues always, you know, so we're trying to make sure it's a nice virtual show for Monday. But that was the call. The call was, hey, these folks need your help now. What can you do? And the good news is, you know, there was 30 companies that stepped up, but there was like 40-something teams that did stuff for 37 different nonprofits. So that's pretty amazing in a short space, as well in a time where, again, people are nervous and challenged and don't feel like they can do things. But they can, and again, all of those safety procedures and things are out there. If you aren't doing virtual, which was another thing that people commented on the Google Doc, please know there are a lot of really great toolkit projects. Meaning, what is your current need? What do you need right now? How can you make a toolkit out of that you can send to people, and then they can do it at their home or their business or wherever they are, and then send it back to you? Or many organizations are having people sign up to drop off things. So rather than sign up to volunteer, hey, sign up for Thursday at between 4 and 6 to drop off your items. So So you're only providing 2 hours of time outside your building or with your building social distancing in the right way with your gloves and your mask on, grabbing these donations. So you can manage that from a virtual perspective and still that they can bring it to you and get it to you. The other thing that I've seen a lot of is off-site fundraisers. So again, you know, Girl Scouts and companies, they can be doing, things at home and not even by your location and providing those funds to you. Some of the food banks have some amazing virtual platforms where you're even going down aisles and grabbing food, produce, and putting peanut butter in the shopping cart, and then boom, really all they're doing is pretending like a game that they're shopping, and then they press the button, they just donated $200, $400, $1,000. Especially these companies and groups, that if they do it together, I mean, if everyone's doing $10, you can end up with, thousands and thousands of dollars real quick just by sharing that. So just know there's very easy ways for you to create a toolkit or to create a fundraiser or to create an opportunity for someone to do something at home virtually that can really benefit your organization. And to be honest with you, we should have been doing this all along. Like, it should be hands-on, we need help doing this. Virtual, we need help doing this. Oh, we need your skills to help us, to build our organization up. If we're using all of these tools and we're asking people in the right way for the right reasons, we're not only going to get the support, but we're going to get growth. And that's what we're trying to do. Right now we're surviving, but we need to thrive. And we're hoping with, with this presentation, more importantly with the training that you're getting, that you'll be able to do that. But again, we're a resource for you, and we've got lots of things we can send out. We'll make sure that it does go out to everyone. Links, as well as some specific ideas that you can incorporate real easy, honestly, on Monday. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Ursula. We are just coming up to 4:30, and we want to be respectful of your guys' time. We had some great questions come in and a lot of good dialogue in the chat from everyone. Thanks, guys, for just cool to see the peer learning that's happening. I think Natalie asked a question in terms of social distancing and how to regulate that, and I saw a lot of cool back and forth. Charlie suggested packing outdoors at one of their facilities is a really helpful way, and I saw some other comments there. JL, I saw your question about how effective are postings on social media or volunteer match. Could you maybe speak to that really quickly, Ursula, in terms of how helpful those postings can be?
Yeah, they definitely are, but you've got to make sure that people are pushing them. Our social volunteer influencers basically are volunteers in the disaster cadre. They keep sharing it on their networks, and then we get the hits. Also, we've been lucky because the county will push out something for us when we need them to. In most cases, if we say this is a urgent need, and we need to sign up like now, we make it literally that urgent, those spots will get filled by like in 2 days for hands-on and virtual, but I'm mostly referring to the hands-on.
Someone asked earlier, Ursula, how can we go about warning volunteers that they can't be guaranteed not to get COVID at the facilities or sites, even if they're meeting the best practices along the state and county guidelines?
That's a great question. I think that's one that's going to be discussed for a while. You're going to need to go back to, again, your legal team and see how they want to process that. We all have waivers and we all, put down certain things. You're taking your own risk. We always go by the guidelines of the county and the state, so that reduces our risk. We don't create our own, let's say, guidelines. So that helps. But yeah, I think that's going to continue to grow. It's growing on the company and the community side. People are getting more nervous about, people volunteering and then them suing the company that they went out and volunteered. So how do we mitigate that? I don't think we're there yet. There is some trainings that I saw that are coming up, and I think there might even be one next week with some folks that are, let's say, more experts in that field and getting more questions. I'll include that link as well. That probably is a paid training, but I would assume that we're going to get more guidance from the state in the next month or so on, hopefully, if we move into the next tier level. I think we're red right now, so if we move into the next tier level, we'll get some more guidance. The best thing I can say right now is try to make sure that you're following the state guidelines, that you are using those. If you're an organization, if you really are a food bank, I can connect you with other food banks that are providing those procedures or written procedures, what they have, so you can at least see an example of what you could give someone, but then you're going to need to bring that to your own organization and probably the legal department for them to approve that that's okay.
Yeah, that's a great. And like you said, I think it's just continually evolving. There's no exact formula, but yeah, I would definitely agree, and it might change as time moves forward. And then I just want to echo Ursula. Some people had asked more about materials that could help with just emergency preparedness planning. Those are some things we can send out, right? We'll send out some PDFs and things like that.
Yeah, we'll send out links and PDFs, so that way, again, those major ones are the ones that host all that. But just like when I Googled COOP right away, like, I don't know if it was 50 pages, maybe I'm exaggerating, but there was a very big packet, and then there was also a nice little trifold. So yes, we'll make sure that all goes to you guys, so it's in one email and it's easy to access when and if you need to access it in the future.
Great. All right, well, we are a few minutes after. I want to just give anyone that's still on a chance, if you have any last minute questions that didn't get addressed, actually just go ahead and unmute yourself, and then we're going to have you take the poll one more time before we finish up. But any last minute questions, because I know we covered a lot of information, and we're good to hang on if you guys have questions. So
yeah.
Hi, I just have one question. How can we keep up to date with other practices that come up? Is there anywhere that you guys know of where those kind of practices are being shared and publicized?
For specific sectors, yes. So, for example, when you're talking about those big organizations like CalEOS, FEMA, California Volunteers, they're always updating stuff. In Orange County, we have networks that get together, and so we'll put additional resources. I think Kevin, it's still on our homepage, right? That link to that goes to, yeah. So whenever we get a new link, whenever we get a new practice, we'll put it on our website that you can kind of see. So we'll give you a direct link to that page. Now, again, this is specifically for Orange County, although many of those might have been statewide anyways, but at least I'll give you an idea. It's getting connected with your local network that's doing that. And if you're struggling to find who to contact, who to get to, we'll work with you to try and make that easier. Our nonprofits in Orange County, we're tired of getting thousands of emails that they don't know if they should read or not read, and if this is really the most updated. And so what we try and do is synthesize that and put it in one place so they can go there and get the almost latest and greatest information, and they don't have to read 500 emails to figure out which one they should really do.
yeah, it's a great question, Allie, and I just put it in the chat, the link to that as well. If you want to go on our resource page, it's still there. Emma made a great point. Yeah, a lot of orgs have been sharing what they're doing on LinkedIn. I've definitely seen that coming through a lot. I think right now is the time of everyone just wanting to push out as much information as they can and share with everyone. I don't think people are being secretive. So LinkedIn's definitely a great tool.
Yeah, there's a lot of great collaboration that's happening right now. It's sad that it's sad that the pandemic is forcing that, but it's again we're the ones that are benefiting. And honestly, everyone on this call, we can be our own network too. So just know that this is maybe the first time, but it could be in the future as well.
Definitely. Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to launch this poll real quick. We just want to, really make sure that everything made sense today. And I want you to answer this honestly, because we have office hours and we just want to get an assessment of, we threw out a lot of information. We talked through a lot of these acronyms that we covered, but answer honestly. If you go, okay, well, obviously you've heard of it, but if you don't understand it still, that's okay. and be honest with that. So I'm going to relaunch the same poll we took at the beginning. I just want to make a quick assessment of how you guys are tracking with everything.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Yes, please be honest.
All right, almost halfway, 60%, 70%. All right, almost there. All right. Looks like there's still a few more of you if you want to just submit it real quick. All right. Well, this is great. Thank you guys. It looks like definitely, obviously, a movement from not having no idea what it is to at least have heard about it at this point, and then the next stage, obviously, being implementing it. So, thanks so much. And like Ursula said, I just want to echo, this is its own network. You know, when you guys finish this training program, we know it's only 3 weeks. Like, email 10C, email Ursula, myself, our whole team. We want to continue to be a resource for you. Especially for a lot of your organizations, as you guys, whether you're working there or you're just a short term as a Vista, we want to continue to be a resource. So yeah, just make sure to take full advantage, and next week take advantage of those office hours, and hopefully you guys get a good weekend and a little bit of break, because I know you're working full time and doing this training, and it's a lot. So I really appreciate you guys being here and taking the time. Does anyone have any last minute questions where we follow up? Because I know it is 4:40 on a Friday.
I have one quick question. Are you
Yeah.
going to be able to email this out to us? Because I know some people weren't able to make it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll be sending the recording out either this weekend or on Monday.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, you guys are free to go. Thanks so much, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend. Stay safe, guys. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Ursula.
Bye, guys.
All right. I'm taking screenshots of all the responses.
Oh, thank you. That's perfect. Yeah, because I can make sure that when we do that email, that we get all of the things in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not
So
gonna be
sorry,
perfect
I
though.
didn't know that I hadn't shared my screen again. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. I tried to I didn't want to interrupt you, and then I did once because she won't care, whatever. But I don't think you heard me, and then I was just like, all right, I'm gonna wait for the perfect time. But you kept going, and I was like, I can't interrupt. But it was all good. I think it was still easy to track with what you were saying. The evaluation, I mean, we can compare them. It'll obviously be better, but there was only 37 people at the end, and there's 51 in the training, so it'll be off a little bit.
But that's also good to know. This is how many people were really at the end. You know?
Yeah, totally. So that was good. I mean, it was 50 out of 73, basically, people were here. So that's not everyone, obviously, but.
Well, and I'm hoping that, if there are